Well, good morning, everyone. I want to take us back to maybe when we were younger, maybe a few years ago. I want to talk about the zoo today. Did anyone else besides me really enjoy going to the zoo when they were little? Or maybe they still do? Yeah. My favorite exhibits, I loved going to see the lions, the tigers, the bears. I loved going and seeing these very dangerous animals in a place that was safe. I liked that because I knew if I had ever met these animals in the wild, it would be a very different story. This tiger that it was really cool to get my picture next to would maul me. I knew that this lion that I was putting my hand next to, if I would do that in the wild, well, I probably wouldn't have a hand. I probably wouldn't have much of an arm left. See, I enjoyed going and seeing these animals because I knew that behind the enclosement, behind the glass, behind the bars, I was safe. But if I were to go inside of there, I would not be safe. One zoo experience that is forever ingrained in my mind was when I went to the snake exhibit. And if you guys know me, I'm not a really big snake person. I don't like snakes. But again, I enjoy seeing them when they are in their terrarium, when they're in their cage, when there's a separation, where I know that I'm safe because they're behind something else. However, this exhibit was a little bit different than any snake exhibit that I'd ever been to before. So we walk into this exhibit, and instead of seeing all these rows of terrariums, we see instead just these big trees and plants and this sidewalk. And at first I was confused. Did we go to the wrong exhibit? What's going on? So we start walking through these paths, and then I look up, and to my sheer horror, there's all of these snakes just draped over these trees, sunning themselves, and I get a little freaked out because there's nothing separating that snake hanging on this tree branch directly above where I'm walking under from dropping off the tree and landing on me and doing who knows what to me. It freaked me out because there is no separation. There is a danger. And this morning, we're going to talk about the danger of the tongue. The danger of the tongue. And we're going to be in James chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. If you guys can turn there with me this morning. It'll also be up on the screen. Follow along with me. James says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouth of a horse so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at ships. Though they are so large and are driven by such a strong wind, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. The tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and setting on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird and reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. For the same mouth comes blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, and grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water." James is talking about words. He's wanting us to think our words. Because especially in today's society, James was a very verbal society. But I want us to think past just what we say, but also what we text. Maybe what we email, what we Snapchat, what we Instagram, what we Twitter, what we Facebook post. I want us to think about all that category today and what that does. Why would God in His Bible talk about what we are saying? James is going to walk through. First, he's going to walk us through what the tongue is, how powerful the tongue is. Look back at verses 7 and 8 with me. It says, every kind of beast and bird and reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no one can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Would you guys agree with that? What James isn't saying that every kind of animal should be your pet. I had a friend in Michigan who had some really weird pets. One of her pets was named Oscar. Oscar was an opossum. I met Oscar, came out of the restroom, and here comes lumbering down the hallway this big fat possum wearing a diaper. Because apparently you can't potty train a possum. It's like, a possum shouldn't be in your house. It shouldn't be in a diaper. There are so many things wrong with the situation. She also had like pet baby raccoons. Again, something I'm like, raccoons should not be in your house. There is something weird with this picture. But what James is saying, is he's saying, back in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, he's recording that God said to Adam, to mankind, you will have dominion. You will rule over the animals. You will have power. You will have authority over animals. Whether you tame them to make them pets, or whether you're able to keep them out of your house, or whether you're able to keep them at a safe distance. You have power over them. So James continues this thought. He is comparing these wild animals that, for the most part, humans have control over. If we have an insect problem, we have pest control. We have Zeus where we can see animals, but we're safe. We've done a lot of things where we can interact or separate ourselves from all kinds of animals. But then he's saying, look at what we've been able to do with the animals, but he's saying, but your tongue is the most wild, most dangerous animal of it all, and we've hardly paid attention to it. But it can cause the greatest damage to our spiritual walk, our eternity, than any animal on the planet. He's going through and talking about the magnitude of what our tongue is. And I want us to look at what some of these examples he gives us are. He gives us some examples of the power our tongue has. First, he compares our tongue to like a bit in a horse's mouth. A bit is that little metal piece that you put in a horse's mouth, so when you pull on the reins, it yanks on the horse, so the horse turns. A small child who knows how to use the reins can guide, can steer a very large, very powerful horse. Our bodies, our life, guys, can be controlled by a very little thing that we call our tongue. Came across this quote by K.A. Richardson in the New American Commentary. I want you guys to think about it. It says, people do what they do because of what they are really saying. People do what they do because of what they're really saying. Here's what I think he's meaning. He's saying the reason we do things, the outcome of our actions isn't by chance. Rather, he says, by the real meaning of what we're saying guides what we're going to do. So think about it. So often we can say, oh, I'm a Christian. Or, so if I say I'm a Christian and I say I'm to love people because Christ loved me, but then we talk bad about people or put embarrassing pictures of other people on Snapchat, he's saying, do you really love people or do you love the response you get from people? Because if you really actually love the response you get from people more than just loving people, that is why you're posting embarrassing pictures of people on your Instagram. That's why you're saying mean stories about people. Because what you're really saying is, I love the appreciation I get from people. What are we really saying? Next thing, he compares our tongue to a rudder on a ship. For how large a ship is, the rudder is so small comparatively. But the rudder is so important because the rudder is the distinguishing factor of whether the ship is going to land across the ocean at the port that it's supposed to, or if it's going to be hundreds of miles of off course, landing somewhere completely different. Our tongue, guys, is that rudder. Our tongue is the beginning factor of saying, are we going to land at a right relationship with God, or are we going to be hundreds of miles off course, doing whatever Satan has lied to us because of our tongue, because of what our tongue can drag us into. And finally, he gives this idea of a spark, of a small fire. He says a small spark, a small fire can do so much damage. Ask anyone in California. He says this small fire that was really nice and cute to roast marshmallows on now has destroyed hundreds of acres and destroyed hundreds of millions of dollars of property value because it got out of hand. The immensity of where our words can take us and how quickly they can take us there can be irreversible. So I want you guys to understand that words aren't just words. Words just aren't empty phrases. Words have power. And words can drag us into hypocrisy. When I was reading this, I kind of came across, you guys know that I like the idea of paradox. Questions that kind of answer themselves but are unanswerable, if you would say. So here's a paradox for us. Here's what James is kind of bringing us to. For an example, we don't really like hypocrisy. We don't like hypocritical people. In fact, maybe we even make fun of them. We make fun of the protesters who are saying we want equality, we want peace. And how do they go about doing that? They hold these rallies, they hold these riots where they march through the street destroying property and setting buildings on fire. We look at them and we're like, come on guys, you want equality, you want peace, and you're going to get peace by burning things? That doesn't add up. We like to make fun of the animal rights activists who, to protect animals from hunters, they'll paint them a different color so the hunters can't or won't kill them because their fur won't sell. But in painting them bright orange, it makes all the rest of the predators that naturally eat those people, or eat those animals, see them so much clearer, and the animals are actually killed at just as a rapid pace as if hunters were hunting them. We look at them and we say, the end goal you're wanting and how you're doing that are so polar opposite. But if we say we hate hypocritical people, there's a paradox in that. Because by saying we hate hypocritical people, we say we don't like hypocrisy. But at the same time, we ourselves at some point live in hypocrisy, so by definition we have to say, I hate myself and everyone else. Everyone lives in hypocrisy, and hypocrisy begins with our speech. Hypocrisy begins with our tongue, by not keeping it in check. Speech can drag us into this place of hypocrisy, where we want to do something, but by our actions we do different. We say one thing, but we really mean another. There's a disconnect. That's where our words start to take us. Our words can say, I'm a Christian. So by definition, we're to love others. So we say, I'm a Christian, but then the paradox begins when we start making fun of people. I love people, but I love to make fun of people. There's no love in that. I'm a Christian. I want to be sexually pure. But what are you doing with your boyfriend or your girlfriend? Those actions aren't sexually pure. What you're saying and what you're doing don't come together. There is a paradox that drags us into hypocrisy. Our tongue, our speech can drag us into hypocrisy when we don't keep it in check. Because our words have power, guys. Our words have power. Look at verse 6 with me. He's saying, your tongue, your words, they hold weight. You can't just say something and not mean it. Those words count. There's a poet named Propaganda, and in one of his poems, he says, and I know that when people are sarcastic, that's the only time they're really telling the truth. And I think about that because sometimes you think, oh, I was just being sarcastic about it. Oh, I was just joking about that. Oh, that's just what people say. But guess what? God hears that. God holds you accountable to that. Those words are heard by not only other people, but they're heard by God, and they are counted. They are weighed. Let's look at 9 through 12. James continues down this process of steps of words have power, words bring us into hypocrisy, and now he's telling us, he's explaining to us, so what? Why should we care about our words? Here's why. 6 says it's talking about this idea that words have an eternal effect on us. Words have an eternal effect on us. Our words have an eternal effect on our eternal life. Our words. He's talking about that fire. And I was thinking about fire. I like fire. Anyone else like fire? Yeah, fire's cool. Fire's not cool when it's burning down your house, though. Fire's not cool. Actually, it's hot. But I think when we were shelling, during shelling season on the farm, we would burn the extra cobs and the extra husks. And one summer, hot, dry summer day, we still had a field of corn left to be harvested, but we were burning. And a strong wind came up and picked up a whole bunch of husks that were on fire and started landing them in our dry cornfield full of dry husks. And we had to drop everything we were doing and run in the cornfield and put out all those little fires before they ruined our entire crop. Words can be just like that. Maybe a little sarcasm here might not hurt, but that can explode into something very damaging. When our pride, when using God's name in vain, when arrogance enters our speech and it becomes and it embodies how we talk and how we live and how we perceive things, that is a forest fire. That is very difficult, if not impossible, to put out. He continues on in verse 10, from the same mouth comes blessings and cursing. My brother, these ought not to be so. Verse 11, does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? No, it's not like those new Coke machines where you have 99 flavors of pop that all come from the same spigot. No. You either have a saltwater stream or a freshwater stream. And I want to illustrate it like this, guys. I have two glasses up here. This has clear water. And I want us to illustrate, this is the water, this is the words we use at church when you're around me. These are the good words. This is the language we know that we're supposed to have at church and around pastors, around parents. And then let's be real. This water, this red water, represents how we talk during play practice and after play practice, during sports in the locker room with our friends, on Snapchat, on Instagram, what we listen to, what we repeat. And we like to think that we can keep these things separated. We like to think, oh, I know I'm supposed to talk like this, but, you know, as long as I don't talk like this all the time, I'll be okay. As long as I talk less bad things than I do good things, it'll be fine. Or it's just words. It's just for everyone saying it. It's becoming part of the culture, so it's okay. But check this out, guys. Part of God, part of who God is He's everywhere. He's omnipresent. God doesn't just have an antenna. God doesn't have reception just at churches and on pastors. I don't walk around Spencer so God can hear what everyone around Spencer is doing. God can hear you wherever you're at. He can hear your thoughts. So when we stand before God, God doesn't just hear and see and judge our language at church and around pastors. Rather, He sees both of what we do. And check this out. The clear water doesn't counteract the red water. Rather, the red water stains the clear water. Guys, our words stain, affect everything. Our whole life. They can disqualify us. They can disqualify us from a right relationship with God if we're not careful. They can drag us into hypocrisy, which disqualifies us before God. James says, don't let this happen. Don't let this happen. Be careful. So in our speech, let's be careful. Maybe we like to think of ourselves maybe as a really strong horse that's named Christian. But I challenge you, that bit in your mouth, where is that steering you? Who's controlling that? Is your speech And your life controlled by God, or is it controlled by something, someone else? We might like to think of ourselves as a big steamliner ship that's able to carry hundreds and thousands of tons across the entire ocean. But where is our rudder taking us? Where is our speech, our tongue taking us? Is your speech directing you towards God, towards a relationship with God that lasts everlasting, or are you steering so far off course by just what you say that the rest of your body's turning? Is what you're saying, maybe even the little things, is that going to explode into a huge fire that you can't contain? Is how we talk about God honoring or dishonoring? Because I can tell you this, just as A.K. Richardson does, he says, we do what we do because of what we really say. If we are saying our words, if we're using God's name in vain, it is not a surprise that when you graduate, you will not go to church again. It's not surprising. We need to keep track. We need to keep our tongue under control, because our speech, our tongue, can drag us into a place of hypocrisy